Hello again. It's Professor Keith Schengili-Roberts here, and welcome to Information Architecture INF 2170, Week 4. And this is the pre-recorded portion of the lecture, so this is part 1. And what I'm going to be looking at in this session is I want to have a further look at writing for the web, and actually some writing which is not specifically for the web, though that is delivered via the web. There's a difference. I'll get to that shortly. And I also want to then take a look at interaction design and information architecture, looking at how websites are organized. So without further ado, here we are, and looking again at writing for the web. Now, I did, touch upon this in our last class, looking at some of the basics, and this is where we were talking about things like reading ease scale and ensuring that the right types of fonts were being used. But we didn't really get much of a chance to talk about sort of, in some cases, trying to make content arguably better, not just necessarily easier for people to read according to things like, say, the Fleisch-Kincaid scale, and just for reading ease, but for showing ways that you can actually reformulate the material so that it actually can be easier to comprehend at a glance. So now, what I'm going to be showing you is actually some slides that are actually derived from the firm that I work for, which is Precision Content. They're a consulting firm, and this is one of the many types of things that they do. And they have a nice example here on how to come up with an effective text transformation. So in this before image here, we have some medical content which is oncological, basically meaning that it was written with an audience for essentially doctors who are working with and trying to understand and diagnose and hopefully cure various types of tumors. So we have here this rather large amount of text that is as you can see on the screen before you. And in this case, we have if you do a thorough read of this, you'll note that the PN3 description only closely mirrors descriptions for PN3A, PN3B, and PN3C. Also, the use of the footnotes is confusing. Note how there's one that has 3 stars and one that has 4 stars, and we have that many stars. It's rather hard to pick out which is actually being referred to. It's also worth noting that if you look through the content, the phrase clinically detected and not clinically detected are not exactly opposites. And there's also some inconsistency relating to the enumeration of lymph nodes. So one of the things that the consulting firm that I work for does is to try to look at this information and try to simplify it. So here in this next slide, this is what essentially that same content was transformed to. In this case, throwing things into a table with a much more clear and direct structure. Also greatly reducing the word count, reducing also again the use of passive voice within the material, which again is also definitely making things more active voice is known to be better in terms of comprehension and retention. There is in fact an almost 20% increase in the Fleisch reading ease score in this case. And notice that there's also, there's more white space. Instead of getting a wall of text, you get a table where things are much more easier to comprehend and essentially glance at. There's also no longer a need for the footnotes, and there's and to help things and to help the reader out, there's more addition of labels and visual elements. Now, typically, within something like a web page, you'd be using something like headers, and you can see that there is, in fact, two types of headers here. With the top, the one at the top that says metastases, and then pathological node level 3 definitions. But in this case, the idea was to throw this into a table, and in the end, it makes for a much easier read. And again, if someone has to come back to this material for reference, which is certainly one of the scenarios for this type of content, it is again much more easier to comprehend. So it's when we're looking at writing for the web, quite often we are looking at re-envisioning how that content can be structured so that it can be much more clear and concise. Now I want to talk about something slightly different, and this is going to lead into a subject that's kind of near and dear to my heart, which is structured content, and I'll get to that. This again is an example from the consulting firm that I work for, Precision Content, and more specifically from the boss, who is Rob Hanna, who's been talking about this type of division for years, and is we still actually have weekly discussions on how this sort of thing can actually be improved upon. This is one of the cool things when you're working for a firm that works like this, is like how can we actually make this more structured? How can we make this these types of things more repeatable? Anyways, let me get to how this is actually broken down. So one is essentially looking at language arts for trying to get a personal response, and the other is language arts for informational purposes. So for when you're seeking a personal response, it's inevitably to emotionally engage the reader, and the typical techniques of this are narrative style, varied vocabulary and structure, and deliberately withholding information. I mean, if you're thinking about a narrative such as a murder mystery, for example, yeah, you're withholding information to build up the suspense of the story. This is very much writer-driven and is meant to be read, and read typically for if we're talking about a novel, for example, it's read for pleasure. If you're looking up information on a product, it's perhaps trying to sell you on some of the key features of things. Now, when we're looking at language arts from an informational perspective, the intent here is now different. It's to convey information to the reader, and the techniques here that are typically used are, or certainly what can be used, are a consistent modular structure, concise and direct vocabulary, and often a use of graphics. Now, having said that, you can use graphics with personal response as well. I mean, I have a shelf behind me in my library that has a bunch of graphic novels, for example. But in this case, the point is that the graphics are here to help convey a sense of what the user can actually do and manipulate within a particular set of instructions. This is definitely meant to be reader-driven, and it is meant to be used. So it's meant to be delivered to a user when and where they actually need that information. I mean, it's good, for example, to know how to put extra air pressure into a tire, but until you actually need to do that, or maybe a better example would be like how to properly take off a tire from a car, but until you actually need to do that, it's far better to, you then want to read that information so that you have you make sure that you're doing it properly. So here again is language instructions for information. This is a classical, IKEA instruction set. And in this case, it's being done purely visually, showing you exactly what you are supposed to do. In this case, it's trying to assemble a bed. I'll tell you, as somebody who is very recently moved, I have had to look at a lot of these types of this type of information of late, and doing it well is really I want to say it's almost like a piece of art. I definitely many IKEA things that I've done and assembled in the past, and I probably for many people here as well, There may not be enough detail that is shown, but when it's done well, you know exactly which way the thing is supposed to be oriented, and you get things right the first time. So this again is looking at information from from an instructional standpoint. Now, this case is really more or less with pictures and some words, but it's really more like measurements. That's all we're talking about here. Where we're talking about here is a kind of ridiculous example of how this actually could be done in terms of, say, the Canadian novelist Michael Ondaatje wrote IKEA instructions instead. He might write it something like this. The eel-shaped talisman squirms inside the raspy recycled box. A series of quarter turns, clock hands marking time, bonds back to base. An alphabet of connections in English and French. A into groove B. C slots into D. Chipboard hurdles communicating Swedish hegemony. And this is a parody by author Jeff Thomas from the Globe and Mail, essentially saying what would be the typical style if Ondaatje actually did do something like the IKEA instructions from the left. And you see, you do not want this type of information when you're trying to put together an IKEA bed, for example. So it's really not that helpful. You could be much more straightforward. Now, this could be the beginning of a good story that includes an IKEA bed assembly, but this is not the sort of information you want when you are in fact assembling a bed. So when we're looking at the language arts aspect of things in practice, in terms of the language arts for personal response, from a website perspective, most typically it is used to persuade. Most advertising content is in fact, oops, I'm missing a letter there, but most advertising content is language arts for personal response. It appeals to emotion rather than dispassionate thought, and also used for telling stories or a narrative, has also traditionally been hard to categorize and tends to be unstructured. Whereas language arts for information provides instructional content covering the what, why, when, and how of a thing. And a lot of instructional and technical content has been based into categories, into more structured forms. If you've done any sort of e-learning work, you may well have worked with SCORM. SCORM, by the way, is short for Shareable Content Object Reference Model. And my particular specialty is in the Darwin Information Typing Architecture, that's DITA, which is used primarily in technical communications. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about what exactly is DITA. It's an open XML standard used for creating structured content, built primarily, but not exclusively, around the idea of content reuse. It's been around since 2005 and has gained significant traction in the technical authoring community. It actually first started as an internal project within IBM in the early to mid, mainly the early 2000s. And as I say, it was one of the key things they were trying to do was to move away from a narrative structure and essentially to provide things in a piecemeal fashion aimed specifically for the web. There are many other types of standards out there, structured content standards. Chief one, sort of, if you want to say a competitor, there's one called DocBook. It was designed not so much for the web, but for a more conveying narrative style of information, and is not as well suited to the web, I would argue, as say something like DITA is, because the information is designed to be in DITA, is designed to be there to be chunked and to be reused as required. As an example, if you have, and this is just a very simplistic example, if you have something like, say, an introduction section to something like a technical manual for, hey, taking that tire off your car, if the same introduction can be used elsewhere in, say, manuals relating to the car, perhaps for other things, perhaps relating to tire repair, for example, or tire inflation, you can use that same introductory section so long as it applies to those other portions of that particular manual. If you're wondering who is using DITA, the most recent count is 750 firms or so worldwide. It's actually probably significantly higher than this, but I'm doing some research in this area, and these are the ones that I can confirm they're actually using this particular standard. And by the way, this image is compiled from the logos of only 560 of those companies. This is one of my interests. I will actually return to this in the very final lecture, and you don't necessarily have to know an awful lot about this particular standard. This is really just a sort of a way to introduce the idea of structured content and how it can be applied. I will, however, talk a little bit more about what actually makes DITA DITA, and it is an acronym, and I mentioned this before. The D is for Darwin, which alludes to his concept of evolutionary adaptation, as DITA is based on the ideas of specialization and inheritance. So all topic types inherit features of top-level generic topic type, and then they're specialized for functions underneath that. And we'll talk about that in the next slide. The IT is for information typing, defining the semantic structure of individual topics. And the topic types are concept, task, reference, gloss entry, and troubleshooting. And the A is for architecture, as this is also a structured standard that is extensible. For example, there is another form of DITA called lightweight DITA, and that uses the same DITA structure, but it in fact can be written using, instead of XML, using HTML5 or Markdown. One of the key things about DITA is that it really does focus on the idea of topic typing, which gives focus to the technical communicator when they're creating their content. So a concept provides information on the function of a product feature, for example. A task gives stepwise instructions on what to do. So the concept, and again, coming back to the idea of the removing the tire example, would be a concept would essentially be something like talking about why you might want to consider removing the tire, perhaps if you're getting the tires rebalanced, for example. So providing background conceptual information on why this might be something you want to do, or if you're at the roadside, like you have to take off a tire and put on a spare in order to continue driving. The task would then provide information on, like what is the stepwise fashion of, removing the lug nuts on the axle so that you can actually remove the tire. Reference could then provide additional supporting information. This would be things like, what are the proper tire pressures? Things that might, properly be put into something like, say, a table, are often, but not always, good, essentially reference information types. Troubleshooting provides solution to a specific issue, such as, how do I go about putting the tire back on once, or putting the spare tire back on, if in fact that's the scenario. And a glossary then provides a description of terms pertaining to that particular product. So it might actually talk about like the individual parts of a tire, for example. And I'll just say that again, all of these provide focus to the people who are writing in these topic types. And again, the idea is that they are essentially to be, content can be reused where feasible across different product offerings, for example. So let's say that we are a car manufacturer and we have created a manual, and one of those procedures is about how to take the tires off of said car. You could then use this perhaps with only slight changes as necessary for other iterations, future versions of that particular type of car that is then sold by the firm. Some of the chief business strengths of the DITA standard include things like content reuse, which I've already alluded to, also things like lower localization costs, and the reasoning for that is to do with if you have if you are translating something from English to another language, and you're reusing that at instead of having to translate the content for an entire chapter, you're simply doing much smaller portions which can be reused. You don't have to necessarily always have to fully review the material that has already been translated. Now, sometimes you do in terms of how things work in context, but even then, reviewing translated content is cheaper from a business perspective than having to retranslate it from scratch. DITA also works, and in fact, almost all XML structured content works in terms of content and formatting separation, so there is in fact less time spent formatting. It's actually quite surprising how much time can be spent in things like a desktop publishing program in terms of tweaking the look and feel of things. I know that past experience. Now I might be dating myself here, but you actually can literally for a long document spend hours of time changing the headers and making sure that things are consistent. If you're changing all of your H1 headers to H2, and then you have to change all the H2s to H3s and H3s, and that can and is time consuming. With a structured formatting language like DITA, this is all essentially done automatically. And one of the other key things, and this is actually this goes all the way back to one of IBM's original intents with coming up with the standard, is multi-channel publishing. So it doesn't just publish content to the web, but it can also be published to PDF output, and other various types of output as required for particular devices, for example. So if you wanted to have in context help, for example, or other forms of HTML content, for example, that can also be done. And it's important to realize that this is being done not just to save costs, but it's also because the customer experience is becoming more and more of a business imperative. So before the digital transformation, before the advent of the web, key business interactions with customers happened in the physical world. But there were many key touch points users and customers would encounter. So for example, marketing might provide something like a data sheet for detailing the features of a product. Sales would give additional supporting information, providing persuasive data enticing you to buy their product. Once the product was purchased, you would then get the fine manual that you would hopefully then read. And if there were any issues that were encountered post-purchase, you would then contact support and services to help you with your product. But then customers moved online, and we moved what had formerly been physical content online as well. So since users could now choose the specific information they were looking for, it was much easier to completely skip parts of the customer experience which did not directly answer the types of questions users or customers were asking. So, and in fact, sales information often does not meet what users are actually seeking. So users would not actually get to, and that would mean that users would not actually get to the phone call to support and services stage if other options were available beforehand. So in this type of scenario, technical communications has come more to the fore since it more often contains information that prospective customers are actually looking for. Now, what you see here is Google's 4 user moments, and this is from a document they published back a few years ago. If you search Google for 4 user moments, you'll find it, and it's well worth a look. In this case, I want to focus on the first and third moments. The first moment highlights that 65% of online customers look up more information now than ever. And notice that the picture shows someone looking up their information on their smartphone. This experience is highlighted in the third moment, where Google finds that 91% of smartphone users turn to their phones when doing a task. The key thing here is that the majority of all searches have moved to mobile devices, and these 4 moments summarize the 4 most popular types of questions that people are making. This really confirms a fundamental shift of the traditional customer journey. And these 2 Google moments adapt well to the types of content technical communicators provide who are using structured formats such as DITA. Given this, is it any wonder that database technical communications can dominate search engine results? And this can in fact be the case. So there is an imperative now to provide more customer-focused information, both from a marketing and technical documentation perspective. And partly by design and partly by accident, structured content formats such as DITA are slowly being recognized as being more and more pivotal to doing this. Now, having said that, this is the realm that I work in perhaps the most. There are other, and this is really just a highlight that there are other aspects of information architecture that are worth looking at. So it's not necessarily just about designing better interfaces on the web. It can, and I would argue should be, also about providing better information to users when and where they want it. Another interesting and honestly cool aspect of this is looking at the advent of things such as chatbots and, in more general, artificial intelligence. This has been getting a lot of interest lately in research and in business circles. And part of the reason why structured content forms, such as DITA, are really coming to the fore in this area is that when it's done with descriptive metadata, in other words, you have all of these topics and they are properly described as to what they are about, it is easier for artificial intelligence programs to work with them because they're looking specifically for information on, like a user is asking for information on, for example, how to remove the tires. And if, in this case, they're not looking at the manual, they are, in this case, interacting with a chatbot interface. And what the chatbot is going to do in its conversational matrix, it then essentially gets information from the user and is like, okay, this person is trying to remove a tire. Do I have information on that? It then does its own search and looks for relevant data and provides what it considers to be the best hit, so to speak. And it can only do that if the information, the structured information that is available, is properly described using metadata, saying that this is what this is about. Now, having said all of this, this is still relatively in the early days, but it's an interesting goal for information architects and user experience designers who make conversational programs who can then retrieve the content that users are looking for on demand. Now, having said this, I've been talking all about, all of the good aspects of structured content, but I just have to say that, in fact, most content is, in fact, from, in terms of most business content that exists out there, is in fact still unstructured. It's thought to make up unstructured content is thought to make up, roughly 80% or more of all enterprise data that's out there. And hey, if you have to ask what is the world's most popular technical writing tool, it's Word. Word, interestingly enough, does in fact have some structure in it, but for the most part, it is considered a free-form tool. And it's much harder, relatively speaking, to extract information out of that. Not impossible, but harder. Having said that, so structured content is a solution for making unstructured content more usable, right? Well, path is not so clear-cut. And that is because artificial intelligence is also being applied to unstructured content. If we're looking at things like, say, IBM Watson, which is depicted here, it can be applied equally to unstructured and to structured content. And IBM calls calls artificial intelligence the key to making unstructured data useful. Because structured content is descriptive and says what it is, and it's much more easy for lesser artificial intelligence programs to work with it. So you actually need the power of something like a Watson to be able to get useful data out of all of the unstructured content that exists. And having said that, it's not just IBM. Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and others are all producing tools for analyzing unstructured content, images, and audio data. Having said this, this is still early days, but it's worth noting that artificial intelligence and chatbots are not being used exclusively with structured content. This then brings up the question of, well, who exactly is using structured content, such as data? And to be fair, it really does require an upfront investment in time and money. The benefits are definitely worth it, but it may not be apparent or obvious at first. And my own research has found that it tends to be larger firms as they who are using structured content as they derive the most return on investment as they operate at scale. And by large, we're talking about companies that typically have at least 500 employees and annual revenues starting in the 100 million US range. That's not to say that structured content can't be used by smaller firms. In fact, there are many smaller firms that are using it. But when you're operating at scale, structured content makes a whole lot more sense from a cost-effective perspective. And to be fair, many firms are also adopting a hybrid approach. What I find is that it's rare to find a large firm that is using data exclusively. So having said all of this, this is really just a kind of an introduction to the ideas of structured versus unstructured content, and looking at it from a business perspective, like the how and why and where it can be used. From your perspective, what I'm hoping to get across, and I said this earlier, is that information architecture is not necessarily just about web content per se, but it can the same techniques that you'll learn over this course can be applied to essentially structured content and non web-based forms of content delivery. So again, this is really just sort of talking about this. This is where my official job title as senior content strategist comes into play. Much of the work I do is in fact classic information architecture, but it's applied typically more globally across how information is being disseminated within a firm, and that is and has been my bread and butter for many a year now. But again, this is just to sort of introduce you to some other ideas where information architecture can be applied. I also want to touch upon looking at a little bit more in terms of writing content specifically for user experience. And there's it's worth emphasizing that there are a number, like there is, it's not just the polar bear book out there. There's actually been a wealth. If anything, I'd say we're in something of a golden age now of books and texts on the subject of covering different aspects of information architecture. And one of my favorite publishing houses that focuses on this is Rosenfeld Media, and this particular book sort of fits in nice with this particular subject. I will in fact be using other Rosenfeld books in other aspects of this course. Not to worry, I'm not asking you to read these. This is more to say there is still ongoing research and books designed to deliver information to practicing professionals, such as you might end up being if in fact you end up working as an information architect. So this particular book, which is just over a year old, from January 2020, is looking at how to write for user experience design. And I think they make a very good point by pointing out that, in fact, words from a user experience perspective are, in fact, everywhere. So here is, in this case, the content of the DoorDash interface as typically seen on a mobile device. And here's that same content without the words. This really does go a long way to illustrate how much of interfaces really depends on writing. And you want to make sure, by that same token, that you get that writing right. Here's some of their idea on the idea of what are genuinely useful words. So you want to give users control and to help them prioritize their needs. That's what really makes writing useful. So compare and contrast the writing and intent behind the content on these two sets of web pages. So on the left-hand side, we have, yes, I want to register for Schengili-Roberts loyalty program by Mealy Hotels International. I've read the I do not want to receive advertisements. Activate. So wait a second. What's going on here? Am I getting announcements from advertisements from when I activate my and I have to activate my account and then create my So that's, I'm looking at this and the reason why it's here is that it's not entirely clear what is going on. Compare that and contrast that to an equivalent policy page for Pinterest. And in this case, you have the legal text. Pinterest may contain links to third-party websites, advertiser services, special offers, or other blah, blah. And then below it, more simply put, Pinterest has links to content off of Pinterest. Most of that stuff is awesome, but we're not responsible when it's not. And that provides a nice and quick summary of the material that comes before. It is genuinely useful. So, compare and contrast the experience of the website on the left-hand side to what you see on the right. You want to provide useful information that users can act and comprehend. Having said that, there's also the idea of irresponsible words, and again, this is from the book. Irresponsible writing weaponizes language to cause harm to your users. One popular example is the example of confirm shaming. This situation occurs when an interface asks the users for something and then forces them to say something negative about themselves in order to decline. So that, hey, that's what you see here. Get the SEO checklist I use to rank #1 for SEO techniques. And enter your email, blah blah blah, and then the way to get out of this is to click on the no thanks, I do not want higher rankings. Okay, and then the one we have for Delish, 14 simple dinners for one. Enter your email to unlock our exclusive recipes. And of course, the option for getting rid of the annoying pop-up in this case is no thanks, I'll have a microwave dinner for tonight. It's like, oh, yikes. You really don't want to have the users, necessarily feel bad about themselves for, dismissing an annoying pop-up. Despite the fact that most people will simply click on this and supposedly not think anything more of it. To be fair, there is subtle unconscious effects of this sort of thing, and this is essentially poor behavior in terms of writing content for the web. It really is up to the writer to ensure that their content is not misused. It's also worth pointing out how metaphors can influence behavior. So one of the author's first conversational interfaces is seen here. And the quote from the book is, "It greeted users and then asked what they needed, which is exactly how you'd expect a human providing chat support to act. Users would greet the bot back to be polite, but the bot wasn't expecting them to the bot was expecting them not to essentially, say hello back, but describe their issue. This meant that we needed to design a new opening message that didn't prompt this type of response and helped our users faster. So you see from the chat window, hi, I'm a chatbot. How can I help you? And then Josie says hi, quite naturally back. And then chatbot's like, sorry, I didn't catch that. What do you need help with? So the chatbot in this conversational um, uh, way of seeking information is essentially the prompt. What it wants is keywords, essentially in this case, that correspond to information that it can then deliver, such as, again, coming back to the removing of a tire part. It's like, how can I help you? Can you help me removing a tire from my car? And then you'd hope the chatbot might actually ask for further information to find out, say, the type of car or the type of wheel or what have you, and then provide the information that is specific. But by saying, hi, I'm a chatbot, the natural response for most people in this conversational scenario is, of course, to say hi back. So you need to, anticipate users' responses and act accordingly in the design of your, in this case, of the conversational interface. And by the way, I hope to provide some more information on interactions with things, so to speak, including things like chatbots. There's some very recent publications that have come out that I'm currently looking over, and I hope to incorporate into a future class in this course. So anyway, stick around, and with any luck, we'll see more of that in an upcoming class. Coming back to the book, there's also you want to talk about writing effective error messages. And again, from the book, avoiding errors is really about preventing frustration while helping people accomplish their tasks. The fewer issues they face, the more convenient and experience it is to the customer. So in this case, the error message is concise and clear, but it doesn't help the user understand what to do next. So in this particular case, it's Chase Bank. They have a quick deposit using, basically the idea is that you can use your camera to photograph a check, and then it is automatically deposited. The deposited amount in this particular case is $15,000, and the error message is, this is over your deposit limit. Your current mobile deposit limit is $10,000. Okay, but what do you do? There's no information provided here as to what you do next. So I mean, in my case, I'm if I was doing this, I would assume that I can't do this on my phone. And then either I would be calling Chase, or I would be going to my nearest Chase branch to, in fact, deposit the check in person, which, is not convenient for me and takes up resources from Chase. So, I mean, perhaps those are the outcomes that are required in this particular case, but the fact that there's no option, no viable option for the user to take is, what do you need to take into account when you are writing things like error messages. Here's an idea of a useful 404 error message. If you're not familiar with what a 404 message is, it's essentially if you go to a website and there is, in fact, no specific page for that website, this is the default page that would typically come up. And by the way, I recommend you try this with your target website. So you now have an idea, thanks to the content audit, as to what are the pages that are available on your website. Try putting in a page that does not exist, and then see what the 404 message that you get back, if any, is provided. Again, something to try. So in this particular case, it's for Airbnb, and the 404 message in this case is, oops, we can't seem to find what you're looking for. And what they provide are some helpful links. And this is a fairly common 404 message strategy, such as, in this case, linking back to the home page, linking to search for help, and then other aspects that users might be looking for directly on the Airbnb website. So you want to be helpful. You don't want to just say, you've come to a page where nothing there is no page here for this. So what should the user do next? You want to provide them with options. And you want to, essentially give the user help for them to look elsewhere within the website. This is something by the way, I'd recommend if you're really interested in learning more about writing effectively for the web. There's a lot of really nice short video essays essentially done on behalf of the Nielsen-Norman Group. This is, in fact, one of them. And this is, okay, it's the title, The Biggest Mistake in Writing for the Web. Okay, having said that, genuinely good evidence-based research from the Nielsen-Norman Group on this particular topic. I do highly recommend this. Okay, all right, moving on. Now, let's have a look at organization systems. So, what are they? We need to organize information so that people can find the right answers to their questions. We also need to be able to provide them with context and support casual browsing as well as direct search. So this is an opportunity for an information architect to bring chaos to some form of order. Now, librarians have been doing this sort of thing since the days of the ancients and putting scrolls on a shelf. Librarians traditionally have organized information in this type of way, but now for many of us, we are becoming essentially our own librarians, and the challenges with this is things like ambiguity. There may be in fact multiple meanings for terms. There's also some issues relating to heterogeneity. Digital information comes again in multiple formats. Differences in perspective, your own mental model versus your user's mental models, on how you conceive information, how your users may actually want that in a particular scenario. There's also the idea of internal politics and how organizations, how they run things, and again, they provide their own perspective on organizing information, which may not always match how user expectations. Oh, actually, I do want to talk one other thing. There's also the idea of what's known as findability versus putability. Good metadata and a well-defined taxonomy can not only help with findability, but with putability as well. They really do go hand in hand, and that's really illustrated, I think, better in this idea from organization of chaos in a single click. If you are using a tool that allows you to build information on within a corporate website, such as say something like SharePoint, what often happens is that hierarchies become more and more chaotic as users add content or folders to suit their own idiosyncratic needs. It's an information architect's job to build in checks and balances to prevent this from happening. So what we have on the left on this slide is a well-organized intranet hierarchy. On the right, a user arbitrarily adds a new category, and instantly all that good work is shot to heck. This hierarchy example, by the way, is from Practical SharePoint Information Architecture. Now, there are many different types of organizational schemes out there. There are exact organizational schemes. And this would include things like alphabetic schemes, chronological schemes, and geographic schemes. And then there are more ambiguous organization schemes, such as topical organization schemes, task-oriented schemes, audience-specific schemes, and metaphor-driven schemes. And note that, these are schemes, basically specific and generally well-understood ways of organizing information. There are also structures which we will also get to. Having said this, it's rare to find an entire website organized on just a single type of scheme. Usually you'll have more than one used within a website, but perhaps on a specific page, or perhaps within a menu selection, you may find that there are there's one that's being focused on. In terms of alphabetical schemes, well, we're talking about things like encyclopedias, dictionaries, phone books, everything that runs from A to Z. But having said that, you need to use this where it makes the most sense to do so. Where it might even be the expected way to order things. A good example is a drop-down menu of states or provinces. This has proven to be more user-friendly than, say, a map. So what we have here is select the state, and sure enough, people, it's fairly easy for people who to be able to select their state or province because they know. I mean, whenever whenever I go to select Canada from a list of countries on an international website, I almost always hit CCC 3 times, because Canada is almost always the third country. I think after Cameroon and I can't remember the first one. Anyways, to because it always appears in the same place in the list. However, you can also have fairly poor examples. So what you see here below the state selection is Zappos shoes discussing shoe width. It's in alpha order rather than in width order, which in this case would be something like so 4A, AAA, and AA, and then on up to 3E and 4E are relate from narrowest to widest. Also, OS means one size. So in this case, alphabetizing actually does not give an indication as to proper sizing. So again, you need to use alphabetical schemes appropriately. Then we get to the idea of chronological schemes, and in this, basically, what are we looking at? We're talking about dates and times to arrange things like, say, archives, diary, blog sites, television guides. This is where you want to show people what is either the most recent or oldest piece of content on the site, depending on what they're looking for. In this case, a news feed is listed in chronological order. And generally speaking, how would you expect something like a list of press releases to be organized? And generally, it's chronologically with the most recent listed at the top. Then we have things like geographical schemes, such as this is reflected in things like the Google search, where you ask Google essentially, what are the nearest restaurants near me, or what are the nearest hardware stores near me, things like that. This is based on the idea of geolocation and also on classifieds. The example you see in the top right is from Kijiji, and that allows you to search within certain areas of the province to locate goods or services that are in fact nearest to you. If you're in Toronto, you might have the benefit of selecting from, say, all of Toronto / GTA. As I now live in London, I'm finding that I can actually restrict my searches to London, and then I have the option of expanding the search area from, I think the default is like 25 kilometers, and then expand that up to 55 or 75 kilometers, so that I can see goods and or services that are available to me within closer to where I live. What you see with the Komatsu website at the bottom, it enables users to choose which geographic location applies to them. We've talked about that in a previous class. If you go to another an auction site, there's a site called Max Sold, and it has a long list of locations, including GTA. Now, there's also the idea behind more topical schemes, where information is organized by subject or topic. So newspapers, academic courses, and department chapters and books, so on and so forth. It's influenced in this case by cultural constructs. So in this case, we're looking at, say, the Consumer Reports website, and the idea of product reviews. And in this case, it's looking at, in this case, the most popular. So, but also looking at the how it's divided by, things that relate to babies and kids. So things like car seats, children health, doctors in the hospital, so on and so forth. Yeah, that relate to that particular topic. And when you're an IA, you need to define the breadth of that coverage, large versus narrow. So, for Consumer Reports, it's that we are seeing really their main focus is here: appliances, babies and kids, cars, electronics, health, home and garden, and money services and products. And then, that's because they know who their audience is and they know that they are interested in these types of categories. So in this case, this is a particular topical scheme. Then we have task-oriented schemes, where information is organized by process, function, or tasks. This is common in desktop and mobile applications, and also where user interaction tasks are center stage. Internet's being a particularly good example of this. And it's also rare to find websites organized solely by tasks. It's usually embedded within specific substates. So if in fact you are in the process of thinking about buying a house, going through the individual steps provided by a mortgage payment calculator is a genuinely useful thing to do. You would not expect to go through the entirety of a bank site where you're always prompted for questions, but it is useful in this particular case. By the same token, what we have below is a part of Word's ribbon interface. And again, it sort of breaks things down as much as possible by the things that a user might want to do within Word, such as insert a table, insert a picture, insert shapes, and not exclusively, but often a lot of the things on the left are considered items which are more likely for a user to choose because people tend to start on the left-hand side first and then read to the right. And of course, for cultures where reading from left to right is in fact the norm. What I'm trying to say here is that essentially, the tasks in this particular case for Word are in a way kind of prioritized by how often people are expected to be using the individual things presented here. So it's more likely that people are going to be inserting tables than pictures or shapes and so on and so forth. But that's not, of course, always the case. But at least you know where to find specific examples relatively easy within the ribbon interface. There are also audience-specific schemes where there may be, two or more clearly defined audiences. This brings all of the promise and peril associated with any form of personalization. It's good for targeting specific users, but you also have to realize that people may fit into more than one type of audience. So on the NASA website, they're upfront about it. If you want information for media, okay, we have a whole section on that. For educators, all right, there's another whole section on that. And then for students, hey, again, there's information that is specifically geared towards that particular audience. And it's also worth noting that some of these things may be open or closed. So we have the CERN website working with particle physics. And you can find out information about the organization, but they also have information specifically for students and educators, lumped together, and then for scientists, and then those working in the more broader CERN community. Then you can have, and you just knew that I'd be bringing Microsoft Bob back at some point. There are metaphor-driven schemes as well. Part of the idea is that they have to, if you're using metaphors, they have to be familiar to users. And it can also introduce unwanted baggage or can be rather limited. So what you see here is the opening scene from Microsoft Bob, released back in March of 1995. It was designed, believe it or not, to replace Program Manager and has several rooms where people could launch applications. For example, to launch Microsoft Word, you would click on the paper and pen on the desk. Yeah, you would actually just have to know that. That's actually how that worked. And while it's also worth noting that there are hybrid schemes and hybrid schemes. And while this is not impossible, this type of approach tends to be rare. The power of a pure organization scheme derives really from its ability to suggest a simple mental model that users can quickly understand. So in this example from the Polar Bear book, the Smithsonian website combines task, topic, and audience. Now, if you compare it to today's version of the website, you now only get the first two. In other words, they've further simplified things. So the one at the top actually shows where they were using a hybrid scheme, and then the bottom one shows how they decided to change things and evolve to something new. That's actually one thing I really do want to point out with regard to the polar bear book, and of course to websites in general, is that of course they are almost always evolving. So something that you're looking at now may not be the same thing, looking at it. And in fact, as I've mentioned this before, sometimes students will target a particular website, and they before the end of the course, it has in fact been revamped. Having said that, the typical gestation period for doing a revamp of a website is on the order of, typically at least half a year. And of course, this is dependent in part on the size of the website and the resources that are available to it. But, major changes to website organizations typically, the minimum is 6 months, and more often it's more like 9 months to a year. Coming back to the idea of hybrid schemes, hybrid schemes can be confusing for users because they may not, users may not be able to form a mental model to effectively navigate the website. And there's also the issue of shallow versus deep. So shallow hybrid schemes tend to be fine, but deep hybrid schemes, it gets harder for people to follow because it's harder to understand the mental model of what's going on. Now let's talk about organization structures. Talking now about hierarchies and the top-down approach to things. This is the foundation of many good information architectures, particularly for websites. And we, as information architects, have traditionally organized information in hierarchies for many years. And this allows for the quick handling of the scope of information. So, what you've probably learned from your content audits is that you've had a look at the material on the website and you realize that there is, typically a single home page, main navigation, and then from the main navigation that then drills down to, say, a third level of pages. And that's exactly what you're seeing here with this little diagram. It basically, if you think of the top dot as being home page, the ones at the second row being navigation elements, and then the dots at the bottom are the individual web pages. Yeah, that's how things are typically organized. That is, really how the vast majority of websites are in fact organized. If you're looking for another example, a classical org chart provides a good idea of what a typical top-down hierarchy looks like. So you might have the CEO at the top, and you might have various executive VPs immediately under him or her, and then senior managers and directors under them, and then so on and so forth down the line. So if we're looking at hierarchies, hierarchy categories should be mutually exclusive, and there ought to be a balance between breadth and depth. Too narrow and deep, users will have to click through too many levels. If it's too broad and shallow, too many options on the main menu, and lack of depth for content. That's another issue. So you need to take into consideration users' ability to visually scan the page. So here we are looking at this particular website, the Tampa General Hospital, and in this case, we have a kind of a flat hierarchy. The Tampa General Hospital website shows a long list of more than 30 items under medical services. Rather than burying these under a few broad groupings, each distinct treatment area is surfaced and accessible directly from the drop-down menu in the global navigation. And by the way, this is from the Nielsen-Norman Group providing information on flat versus deep hierarchy. So this is one way, one viable way that you can organize information. You also need to recognize the danger of overloading users with too many options. So take a look at this page, which basically is the main page for a poison-related website. Do you think it provides a good starting place to find a particular poison? This is rhetorical, but think of a situation where you think that perhaps somebody has possibly been poisoned. where do you start? Now, in this case, you pretty much have to know where, or like what is the context. And to be fair, the way that this is structured, it's less to do with how a healthcare professional would look at diagnosing a poisoning. It's much more, it's organized much more along the lines of, here are known poisons and here are the main categories that we came up with, in which, somebody ingesting an auto product or pesticide or some sort of pet care product accidentally, or not, what you can then do in that particular case. So again, you need to think of this, from the perspective of who is likely to be using the website and organizing that in a way that makes sense. So this does make a whole lot of sense for a parent who is trying to figure out from without knowing what the poisoning substance is. But if you are a parent and you do happen to know that your child has had accidentally ingested some grout, or has eaten some glaze or varnish, then yes, this will actually be a useful way of organizing the structure. What we suggest is that if you are in fact organizing things in this particular way, is that you also want to subject your designs to rigorous user testing. So take a look at your website design and try it out and see whether or not it works, as the hierarchy that you have devised actually makes sense. Again, looking at hierarchy, so this particular website is from cancer.gov, and this portion of the website provides handy jumping off points, which in many cases represent a whole new hierarchy of organization based on that particular starting point. So again, it's providing information without a whole lot of preliminaries. So you don't actually have to dig deep necessarily to jump to whole other areas easily and quickly. Then we get to another type of organization, such as database structures. This is more typically the bottom-up approach to things. This is where you might have a collection of data arranged for ease and speed of search and retrieval. More often than not, it's really looking at information that is kind of like nearby, so to speak. So instead of looking at the website as a pure hierarchy, it's good to provide information as to, like what is kind of the most information related to the page that you're currently on. So in other words, if you are, let's say we are a website and we are selling clothes, for example, you could in fact provide something like, say, what's known as a breadcrumb to show like the general category through a hierarchy, saying, like homepage, and then men's clothes, and then summer shirts, and then a specific shirt that then falls under that. That is a hierarchy. But you also want to provide for somebody in that situation who's landed on a specific shirt page to not just to the hierarchy, but also to kind of what's next to that page. What is another shirt, another summer shirt, for example, that might be applicable. So this is akin to much more of a relational database structure, where data is stored with a set of relations, often put into tables. And you get to the bottom pieces of content, and then you can also then navigate back up using things like, say, that breadcrumb I mentioned earlier. This is, if you're doing this, metadata is primary here. You want to make sure that it's easy for people, if you're looking to navigate, like to the next object over, so to speak. You need to provide a sufficient information so that when a person clicks on the what's the next item keys link, I should say, that there is something there for the person to click on. This may include, say, the automatic generation of alphabetical indices, depending on what you have in terms of your page content, a dynamic presentation of associative see also links. And again, if I'm guessing here, most people have bought things from Amazon. You typically go to click on a product, be it a book, be it something else. And more often than not, they will say, as you are scanning for information on the item, people who have bought this have also bought this other type of thing. If you are buying something like a computer mouse, maybe it would be a good idea to get a mouse pad for it, for example. So, and keep in mind, this is not a hierarchical thing. Computer mouse pads may be in a completely separate area from actual computer mice, but they are associated by use, and you want to ensure that you can provide, link structures that would allow one to move from mouse to mouse pad fairly easily. It also provides an idea in terms of fielded searching. So, someone who is searching for, in this case, mouse pad may also run across, say, an individual entry for a mouse. And also, things like advanced filtering and sorting of search results can also provide some ideas as to how to effectively organize links in that particular manner. So, here we are. And speaking of Amazon, here we are back again to, this is very much a database type of structure. And in this case, we're doing what people probably almost never do these days, which is actually looking at things from a departmental basis instead of actually just doing a search for the individual item. But again, there has to be a type of hierarchy here, but notice that the organization is essentially kind of looser. Okay, so we do have electronics, but then we have a subset of electronics and office items, and then computer items. Moving on, we can also look at how things like other firms like, say, Canadian Tire do things, and they have a fairly shallow navigation scheme. So we have automotive, tools and hardware, home and essentials, sports and recreation, outdoor living, and gifts for every dad, because I took this particular screenshot close to Father's Day, so that's why that's there. But then you look under, in this case, automotive, and you see there's a lot of related information. So there's still a hierarchy here. So there's tires and wheels, and then interior, and then you see that under tires and wheels, there's all-season tires, performance tires, light truck and SUV tires, wheels, and then then you can drill down to that particular hierarchy. But you realize that these are tires and wheels, car parts, car electronics, trunk accessories are all related to the general category of automotive, and presumably they have done their research and realize that more often than not, people are going to be looking for information, looking for products relating to, say, tires and wheels first, as opposed to pressure washers at the bottom right. So again, there's a whole lot of database related functions going on here, assisted by things like metadata that help bring to the fore the type of information that people are looking for. Now, for the next website, and I do urge you to take a look at this, because you really will not find anything like this almost anymore on the web. Back in the sort of earlier days of the web, you would find more purely hypertext-based sites. Now, having said that, I mean, yes, okay, there are links on any and pretty much every website, but it's almost never used as the core of how the site is structured. So you want to go check this out. Take a look at this particular link, www.ilovebees.co. And what it is that it's I Love Bees was an alternate reality game that served as a real-world experience and viral marketing campaign for the release of Bungie's, and this is going way back, 2004 video game Halo 2. And what it was is that it encouraged people specifically to click on links revealing not only aspects of the Halo 2 game, but sort of the internal workings of things within this own website, which was definitely not about finding things out about bees, but about what was amiss in the Halo 2 world, essentially. Now, having said that, this is rarely a good candidate for a primary organization structure, and really, I highlighted just to show that it exists. I don't know of any rational information architect out there who's ever adopted this scheme, but it just, again, you need to know that that sort of thing is available. Another thing to think about is the idea of introducing the idea of social classification, which can also be used to help organize information. Now, and I say that you may still have things located within a hierarchy, and they may also use bottom-up ways of structuring content, but this is more of a looking at things from a sort of more personalized aspect. Where the information is shared between information environments, and this may allow such things as, say, free tagging, such as hashtag anything, so to speak, on Twitter, which then allows you to explore more content based on that hashtag. No single centralized team creates a taxonomy or defines relationships. It's done entirely by the users of the system. And this has emerged through the tagging efforts of many, many individuals done as an aggregate. One example of that is put into practice is Flickr, which in this case is looking at the all-time most popular images, but classified by users into such things as sunset, beach, water, sky, red, flower, and like this is not necessarily a natural organization scheme that somebody putting together a website specifically about. They may categorize things like flowers and perhaps beach time shots, and something that may talk about individual like colors such as blue, white, and green. But these are the things that have been pulled out from users saying that yes, this particular image has sky in it, or has blue aspects, or contains flowers. It's not a strict hierarchy. It's simply tagging. And this, in fact, can be used in other ways as well. And you can see a whole bunch of ways that you can actually, use tagging to work with other types of ways of organizing information. And, in this case, Pinterest is similarly arranged using what is known as folksonomic tagging. So again, just to sort of recap, we're looking at the idea of being able to arrange things within a website from a hierarchical perspective, from top down, and then there's also the idea of bottom up, meaning you want to provide information as to what is like content, associated content, related content, which is less of a top down, but sort of more like what's to the immediate left or right of me, so to speak. And then we have other such things as social classifications, such as you see here, which is based on the idea of how people, what are the mental models that people bring when they come to a website, and how do they then tag it. And that is all I have for today. Thank you very much. And, well, we will see you for a Tuesday night session. Thank you very much.